Hey everybody, and welcome to the PC Gamer Show. My name is Tom Marks, assistant editor here at PC Gamer, and we've got a very special show today. We've got guests from Firaxis Games here. We've got Garth DeAngelis, lead producer at Firaxis, and Mark Nauta, designer and programmer, and probably many other things. How you guys doing?
Good.
Doing great.
It's great to be here.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm great. I'm excited to talk about XCOM 2 because we've talked about it on the show before. I've been playing it quite a bit. Anybody who's watched the show consistently, that secret game that I had been playing all holiday break and wasn't allowed to talk about was XCOM 2, and I've been enjoying it. But we also have Mr. Wes Fenlon, our hardware editor.
Hey,
here.
I thought you forgot about me for a
No,
second.
almost. I wanted to, but I didn't. We have Wes crammed in the corner here for the first half of the show. We've got a great show. We will be talking about Wes's trip to CES 2016, where you saw a lot of cool and weird things.
Yep.
Like
mice, refrigerators, washing machines,
Rocket
televisions.
boots. Did you try the rocket boots?
Were there rocket boots?
There were rocket boots.
I missed the rocket
And you
boots.
didn't
Damn
buy
it.
them.
I'm really upset now.
Shameful. We'll also be talking about AGDQ, Awesome Games Done Quick, which ended last week and raised $1.2 million for charity, which is just phenomenal. It's a great event. And then we will say goodbye to Wes, and we will be doing a live demo of XCOM 2 with Garth and Mark, and they'll be playing the first mission on the hardest possible difficulty, because Mark takes no guff from the aliens.
Oh yeah, it should be great. It should probably won't lose anybody, right?
Yeah. and the best part of our demos, we have no clue how they're going to go. Like, these
Yeah.
things are completely unscripted. We don't know what the mission's going to be. And
We will literally be pressing the start game button, and we'll see what happens. But first, let's start with what we've been playing recently. Let's start with Wes. Wes, what have you been playing during your CES time and craze?
Well, during CES, I was not playing anything. I was just working and sleeping, and no gambling for me this year. But over the holiday break, that was the first time I really had to play games in a while because we were so busy leading up to the holidays. So I actually spent most of my vacation playing through the old Dark Forces and Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight, which I'd kind of dabbled with like years ago, but I never owned them. I think I didn't have a PC that could run them at the time. And after seeing Force Awakens, I was like, I want some classic Star Wars games. Didn't want to play Battlefront, so I decided to play through the whole Jedi Knight series. So I went back to Dark Forces. I think I played the GOG version of that, and then started playing Jedi Knight, and quickly discovered that game came out in the really awkward time of it was DOS, but also FMV stuff. It came out at a time where 3D graphics accelerators were just coming into the market, and it's so hard to get it to run now, compatibility-wise.
Yeah.
So the version that's on Steam is like borderline unplayable. The version on GOG is better, but it has a binary that GOG changed for the executable, so you can't mod it. It doesn't. It's not compatible with like all the fan community stuff. But I found a great website out there that just detailed like, okay, here are the 10 steps you need to take to make it compatible, to mod it, to run at mono resolutions, all this stuff. So it took like a good 2 hours probably to get that game actually working. But it was worth it. I guess
it was worth it.
I think so.
Meta game you had to play.
It was the most PC experience I had probably
That's what it sounds like.
all last year. But those games, they hold up reasonably well. I mean, they feel very much of that era. The first one is, Dark Forces is basically Doom.
Yeah.
Without the personality that Doom had. Like you can see easily why Doom was groundbreaking and why Dark Forces was kind of a Doom ripoff.
Right.
But it did have some interesting technology. Like it had jumping, which Doom didn't have.
Right.
And it's just cool to look back at like what you could make.
Yeah.
A Star Wars world with in 1994, 95 when that game
They had
came out.
melee stuff in that game too, or no?
Let's see. Dark Forces, I think you can punch, and that's it. And then Jedi Knight adds in the lightsaber,
Right.
which is pretty awesome. And
Yeah.
by the end of that game, it does the Force powers arc really well because you can, if you go light side, like you have jump, speed, those are the basic ones, and then you get just like invincibility, basically light side invincibility. You're just like, I'm awesome, you can't hurt me, and you can pull people's guns out of their hands.
Right.
And
Jedi Knight still has like a pretty good like mod community where people like do
yeah,
matches and stuff.
the later ones, Jedi Academy.
Jedi
like,
Academy, that's
yeah,
the one,
people
yeah.
still play that game. It has like a movie battles mod.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they added in like all the characters from the movies and did significant like balance changes so you can play as a bounty hunter and like jetpack around.
Yeah.
They have like dual blasters, but then the Jedis can deflect the lasers and all this stuff. So I'm going to work up to that point right now. I'm on the expansion to Jedi Knight, which is the one that brings in Mara Jade from the EU. I love Mara Jade, so that's my my Star Wars geek out moment.
The now non-canon EU.
Who?
Yeah. She doesn't.
Don't talk about.
She doesn't exist anymore, but she still exists in my heart.
Yeah.
I totally get that siren call for Star Wars. It crossed my mind of how can I play KOTOR. When the movie came out, I just wanted to go back to that world. I haven't played it since since when it originally came out. So it crossed my mind to go back. Didn't have time because we're finishing a little bit of a game.
Yeah, we're a little busy, but
Yeah,
Did you play KOTOR 2 as well? When
I
it
did.
Came out? Yeah.
I did. I loved them both. I thought they both were really well done.
I don't know why this happened, but they put out a really substantial like patch for KOTOR 2 about 6 months ago, I think, and like
Really?
just to clean it up and make it run properly at probably 2560 and 4K and stuff.
Right.
And fix the bugs that still existed even after the all the fan work on that game.
Yeah.
So I haven't played it since then, but I imagine that if you have the hankering to play that one as well, that it's actually viable now instead of being kind of a pain.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Just a reminder to everybody in chat real quick that if you do have any questions for Mark or Garth about specifically XCOM 2, we will be taking your questions after the demo towards the end of the show. But Garth, what have you been playing recently besides XCOM 2?
Yeah, that's the obvious answer, but we really have. We've just been playing. We've been playing the hell out of XCOM 2, and that has actually been a joy for the past few months to play what the team has been making and seeing it all come together. It's been amazing. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I finally had some time. I was talking with Mark. The past week recently got Darkest Dungeon.
yeah.
For obvious reasons with XCOM, there's certainly some synergies there with their mechanics and what we've done in the past, and so I was really interested when I heard what it was about with the stress system and permanent death and all that good stuff. And it's a pretty awesome game.
I'm really enjoying
It seems cruel, too.
It is cruel. That's exactly what I thought. It has some. I like to think XCOM 2 has some teeth. Like we're okay with abusing our players a little bit, but this game like relishes abuse of you, and it's fun though. Like it definitely hooked me.
Yeah, cool.
I know you played that too. You played Darkest Dungeon as well,
I've been
right?
playing that. It definitely was a lot of fun, and yeah, it is like one more step towards like the more punishing than maybe XCOM is, where like bad stuff just like definitely happens, so you have to deal with your guys like getting super paranoid or abusive or whatever they are.
Yeah, those emergent like personality abilities are awesome. They're so well done, and it's cool how they tie to the stats and the abilities, and it fits so well with the theme of the game. These systemic type of games are what we're really looking to play now that we're going to be done with XCOM 2.
That game also, the first time I played it, I didn't realize in Darkest Dungeon that you like needed a party of people.
Right.
Where you just like people dying or people just being too stressed out to even function was just like a natural part of the game. Like it's one of those games where losing is part of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
Yep.
failure is not an end game state. It's just
And that's right. And they have that. Like before, I think they're legal trained. They have that on the front end of the game where they're like, "You will lose this game." And it's funny. I totally understand why they did that developing XCOM, because we've gone through that a lot even with XCOM. It's tough to wrap and people that watch your show, I'm sure, get it. They know that there's going to be loss in XCOM. That's part of the DNA of the game. But for someone new to it, their instinct when there's losing is like, no, this is wrong. I got to start over.
Yeah.
You don't continue on. And I think that's a really cool when a game can pull that off and you can continue on through loss and try to overcome. It's really interesting.
yeah. What about you, Mark? What have you been playing?
Recently I've kind of got into Rainbow Six Siege.
Yeah.
I haven't played like a ton, but it seems great. It's kind of a unique experience where you have these kind of small teams, and it's got this kind of like realistic military sheen over it, but it's really like it's actually like very gamey. Like there's these, but in a good way. Like they have these scenarios where you have to either attack or defend objectives, and encourages a lot of teamwork and picking different operatives with different abilities, and each game feels like very unique where because the wall you like punch through walls and shoot through little holes in the walls, and you can put up reinforcements, but some guys can go through them, so it kind of encourages this like very like different experience each time, and a lot of like great moments where like crazy stuff will happen and your team will just be like frantically trying to deal with guys like coming from the roof on top of you or whatever. So it's I'm having a good time with it.
Have you been playing mostly just going in solo, or do you have like a crew that you play with regularly to encourage that teamwork?
Yeah, so I have like 2 or 3 guys I play with. We've gone in with a full team before, which was awesome because you can actually like have that next level of planning, but the community actually seems fairly, supportive. There's obviously still some like toxic people that you would expect on the internet, but like people like are trying to like do the objectives and have your team be successful, and they weren't like super. Like I had one mission where there's a guy that can put a grenade thing that shoots grenades in the other room, and I did it in the hostage room and just like wiped out the hostage you're trying to rescue. And I was just like, whoops, sorry, and everyone's like, oh, it happens, don't worry about it. So it's actually a pretty good experience.
It's kind of too quick for Rage, right? Each round will just be over in 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So in comparison or contrast to something like League of Legends, where you're stuck with these people for maybe 20 to 40 minutes, where you can get really mad if someone for 40 minutes is doing badly.
Yeah.
Whereas in Siege, it's 5 rounds at the most of 3 minutes long. It's easier to just kind of forgive and forget and move on to the next round.
Yeah, and then it's like even if you get wiped out early, like, and you're just kind of watching people and talking, it's still like fairly enjoyable because it is like a tense. You can like look at cameras and look at people's views, so you actually are kind of participating.
Yeah. So for me, I actually picked up for the first time, I just got a 970 for Christmas as a gift, and it came with Assassin's Creed Syndicate for free.
Oh. Nice.
And the last Assassin's Creed game I played was 3.
Right.
And
so there's been like 8 in between that, right?
something like that.
I lost count.
It's quite a few, but and I've talked on the show before about how I really enjoyed 3, despite the fact that I seem to be the only one who enjoyed 3. But I wanted to jump back into Syndicate because I do really like the pattern of Assassin's Creed games, and I like that vibe. But I had trouble just at the tutorial, and I've talked to somebody in the office about this, where in the first 20 minutes I had control of my character, I murdered 31 people. And
whoa,
that's fair.
And I was trying to kill one guy, right?
You didn't take the stealth route, did you?
Well, I tried to, but that throws you in these situations where you just kind of have to kill people.
Really?
And
this is in the tutorial?
Well, this is the first level.
The first level after.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's to teach you how to play.
Right,
it's
right.
They make the tutorial like a story thing as well. And I just had trouble. Like immediately, I had trouble relating to that character in any way whatsoever because he murdered 31 people, derailed a train, and then like made a little joke about like that went off the tracks or something like that. And I was like, you just murdered 31 people. Like,
so when you say you were in control of your character, how many of those deaths were like cutscene set piece things versus you bumbled and were like, oops, gotta kill this guy now before he gives me up.
So since it was
a sociopath,
so since it was teaching the mechanics, there were probably at least 8 or 9 of them were scripted. They were teaching you how to fight, right? Then there were a couple more that were like, if you hide behind cover, you can throw a knife to kill somebody. Try it now on this innocent human who's just doing his job. And so there was stuff like that. So probably about like half of them were me just kind of killing people because it seemed like the best way to get through to my goal. But half of them were also like, there were minimum 5 people that you could not avoid killing, which still seems like you just murdered 5 people and just didn't mind.
I mean, you are an assassin though. That's kind of your thing.
I know, but it was just weird to me that like what's the term? Ludonarrative dissonance?
Yeah.
Is that I think that's what it is? Yeah.
Wondrous term.
So like it was weird where I was just like I don't really like
speaking
this
of
character.
ludonarrative dissonance, I haven't played the game yet, but this is the brother, right? This
is the brother character.
So isn't he more of like a loose cannon? He wants to cause havoc, and then the sister is more she's more stealth driven and quieter. Is there a segment with her where
there is, and you don't kill 30 people in it, but
murderous?
you're still trying to, like, she's trying to steal the plans, like these
Yeah.
plans in the beginning, and it's still just like, I don't know. It was just very much a disconnect for me, and
Sure.
I'm not trying to rag on Assassin's Creed here, because I understand that this is not a problem unique to Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
It's a problem in, basically every open world adventure game like that.
Definitely.
And it's not gonna, like, I'm not saying action games shouldn't have killing, right? Like that's silly, but it was just like a weird, like, it's funny how casual it's become.
Totally. I think there's a reliance on it. I mean, in your story, this is going back a few years, but the Tomb Raider reboot.
I was going to say this.
I had the
exact
same
thing.
exact feeling with the Tomb Raider reboot when they did this really good job narratively making Lara feel like she needs to become the survivor, and she's innocent, she needs to learn how to survive, and she has her first kill. And then all of a sudden, you're off to the races, like murdering literally hundreds of people like it's nothing. And she's this expert at it. And I totally had that feeling like you had, where I'm like, I wish that there could have been a way to pace that a little more. And I'm saying that with like Tomb Raider being one of my games of the year that year. I absolutely loved the experience. But that moment early game, I felt the same thing that you did with Jacob in Assassin's Creed.
And it was something I felt too. Like the first time I noticed this, actually, I think in a game was Uncharted, the very first Uncharted, which is not a PC game. But I remember there was a scene where it was like you were trapped in this little room and there was an ambush and you had to be like, oh, I have to escape. And in the process of escaping, you kill like 20 or 30 guys, and it's like.
Yeah.
Man, he just let that roll off his back,
Yeah.
like no problem.
And you hear Nolan North just making witty quips the whole time. You're slaughtering like hundreds of dudes.
He's just
Yeah.
like, whoo, that was tough.
Yeah, right? Like,
Yeah.
it just seems like such an unnatural reaction.
Where's
to
my
that.
treasure?
Yeah.
But I am looking forward to playing more Syndicate, because it did seem like they got, Assassin's Creed has been done over and over, and there's rumors that they're going to take a year off or whatever to kind of like reevaluate. But I still do really enjoy that kind of core gameplay loop of Assassin's Creed. It's the parkour and the fighting. It's fun for me.
Well, you can always go back to Black Flag, because being a pirate who just kills a lot of people and doesn't give a shit fits very well for that game. It's very well.
Yeah.
Plus,
Well,
you get to be a pirate.
Well, let's move on from games we're playing now, and let's talk about what you saw, Wes, at CES 2016. So for those of you who don't know, CES is the Consumer Electronics Show, but I don't think people have referred to it as that in a very long time.
I mean, that's what it is. You know.
Yeah.
I like to write it both ways, just for a little variety.
And it's in Las Vegas, and it's just the biggest tech thing ever.
There's some other big events. There are actually multiple CESs kind of across the world throughout the year, but the Vegas one is the big show, the kind of the primary show. And despite being called the Consumer Electronics Show, it's more the things they are showing off are consumer electronics, but the show is more for business people than anything, I think. I've noticed the more years I go, the more you see how many people there are just there to make deals with their companies and show their products to people in the industry versus reporters and the public. It is not as much for me as it is for those people, but they still make a big showing of putting all their stuff out there, especially the larger companies. Samsung has a booth in CES that kind of like at E3 is larger than our entire office. It's like 5,000 square feet or something. It's like a house just full of all
Did
their
you have
TVs and
home
stuff.
appliances just like talking to you as you walk by? I heard that was one of the trends.
I didn't talk to any refrigerators, but when I was doing a tour of the Samsung booth, the PR woman who was taking me around to like SSDs and because they have cameras, I'm sure they have some stuff like the Gear VR and their monitors and all that stuff. She was like, "Oh, do you want to go check out the smart fridges?" And I'm like,
You want to go talk to my friend?
And she's like, "This year it has a camera in the back that will light up inside and take a photo of all your food and send it to you." I was like, "Okay, that's pretty useful."
Yeah, it can detect right if you're out of eggs. That's what I heard.
Yeah.
My wife was going crazy.
So you can look at your phone, and I don't know if I'm sure there's an app or whatever. Right. It'll show you a photo of your top shelf, I guess, and you can be like, "Oh, that." I don't have any eggs left, or I don't have any milk, or whatever.
I thought that was like
there's still nothing in there.
Yeah.
What a
Empty
surprise.
fridge all the time.
I thought
Vodka and bread.
I thought it was meant as like a security thing. Like if you're like, I think my bread is missing, and you can like check back and like see if someone broke into your house and just like took your bread.
That's what you thought?
Yeah.
It's pretty much the most common crime.
I mean, come on, is that like
Bread
any more
crime.
crazy than like checking your like? I get
That's way more crazy.
We have to stop these bread things.
It's like the Hamburglar, except for bread. He's real.
I'm
Yeah.
protective
You will
of
take
my
your
It's
bread.
not funny. It's not funny.
So there's not a ton of gaming stuff at CES, but obviously VR is the thing. And I think the first time I used the Oculus Rift was at CES like 4 years ago. It wasn't even the Rift at this point. It was like really early hardware. I think it was CES. Who can remember at this point? But it was like I played some hacked version of Skyrim where all you could do is just walk around and jump, and that was like, whoa, this is going to be the future. Like this sucks right now, but I can tell it's going to be amazing. And then, a year later, they had DK1 and showing that off. And now they have the Consumer Rift, and HTC was there with a new version of the Vive Pre, which was new hardware versus the Rift. Like we'd seen that a few months ago at Oculus Connect down in LA. So the big thing with the Vive is they added a new camera on the front of the headset that will pass through a video signal to you, and will also be made available. The data from that will be made available to developers, so they'll be able to integrate it into a game in some way if they want to. But its kind of basic function is it ties into the Chaperone system that Valve, I guess Valve is developing it on their end, or maybe HTC is working on it. But that system is part of Steam VR, and it's kind of it's like a Tron-esque overlay that comes into your view when you are close to objects that you could run into.
Oh.
So when I first tried it last year at GDC, have you guys gotten to use the Vive at all?
No, I haven't. The Vive, have you? No.
So, a year ago, it would just use the mapping of the room they did to let you know when you get too close to a wall, and it kind of fades in this grid in your view in the game, so you can go, okay, I don't want to bump into that wall. And with the camera, they've now added like object kind of silhouette highlighting, so everything in your field of view with the headset on, you can actually see more or less where things are, and you can see, some light details, because they want to keep it fairly minimalist in the game, so that it's not like an actual photo, coming into your virtual world. So if you get too close to a wall, it'll show you the outline of the wall. And then their big example was like they put a chair down and they're like, sit in the chair.
Oh my God.
And sure enough, the chair is right where it should be based on your vision. You can sit in it and stand up and do that kind of thing without having to take the headset off, which is pretty significant, I think, especially for Vive's pitch being room scale VR. It is not a seated experience the way Oculus primarily is. And being able to stand up and sit down and step around your coffee table is pretty important for that standing experience.
I'm curious how they presented it, like demo-wise. Were you in like a different game experience or a game world, and they showed this overlay just come in? Because it feels like it could be, sounds like it worked really well, but it could also be somewhat immersion breaking.
It totally can be,
thing.
So one issue I had, the demos they were showing were just the same ones they had at GDC last year, actually. They had like a Portal-themed one. There's one where you're underwater, kind of on a shipwreck, and you see like a blue whale swim by. There's one where you just do some like 3D painting stuff. One issue I had is I walked into a corner, but it was behind me, and so I didn't know I was close to the wall. But the Chaperone system knew I was close to the wall, so it faded into view and then stayed there. And so I'm like trying to do this cool portal thing while looking at like a person standing 10 feet away in kind of the demo space and seeing the kind of the wall grid without realizing why it had been triggered from behind me. So that was kind of obnoxious. And once you know why that triggers, you go, oh, I must be close to something, and you can probably fix it. But I think the way they implement that will kind of determine whether in normal gameplay it's really cool that you have that element, or you get tired of it, that it gets too finicky and you're like, oh, stop showing me this shit. I'm just trying to play this game. I think right now it works well in the demos, but I don't really know how that's going to scale to playing a game for 3 hours.
What was the coolest game demo you played at CES for VR?
For VR, Eve Valkyrie.
Okay.
Yeah, I did that on the Rift, and it was just a single player demo. And I think the real meat of that game is going to be in the multiplayer, and it is going to be an adjustment for people to play that game. To play that multiplayer, you're going to have to get over like motion sickness.
Right.
If because I'm fairly prone to it, and I think there will be a discrepancy between, oh, you're kind of prone to VR motion sickness versus the kind of motion sickness induced by doing a barrel roll in a VR headset while dogfighting somebody at full speed.
That's just regular motion sickness.
Yeah, like that. It's going to take some adjustment, but that game is really cool. It's hard to describe what just like the scale of that feels like when you see these like capital ships warping into a battle, and the comms people are like, oh shit, red alert, we got ships coming in, and then you just look up and there's like a ship just blanking out like your entire field of vision, and having that in VR in your face in the cockpit view is really cool.
So something I wanted to ask about, because you did mention that Vive wants to do this full room experience, right? But I've seen people talking about how Oculus can do standing experiences too with their camera.
Yeah.
Did you get to do that at all?
I've done it before, and yeah, some people get really pissed when you say Oculus is primarily for sitting and not walking around.
But they've described it many times as a sitting experience.
Yes, you can stand wearing the Oculus, and that was the first time I ever experienced presence in VR, because HTC wasn't even on the scene yet, is when Oculus was demoing being able to stand up and play a game. And at that time, those demos weren't even interactive. You just stood and like you could walk a little bit and look around. That was it. The camera is more limited compared to the Vive, sensors, being able to place them in your whole room. You're going to get one of those in the box with Oculus, which only gives you a few feet you'll be able to walk around in. And I think more importantly, not many developers are going to be trying to design games for large scale movement just because you're not going to have the hardware for that initially. It'll get there eventually. I'm sure 5 years from now, if the Rift is still a thing, it will be full room scale, and they'll have changed how they do the sensing, or they'll have added more cameras or something like that. But for now, most of the games on the Oculus are designed for sitting down. Maybe you swivel around in a chair, or maybe you stand up, but you're not really walking around. And I think the Vive will have more games aimed at taking advantage of that hardware.
So I got to ask you guys as developers, like, you're developing a top-down strategy game. Like, do you look at VR as a thing that could be applied to any genre, even one like XCOM? Or do you as people who make games say like, oh, that's cool, but like some other people are going to work on it, and maybe I have ideas for it,
Personally, I think it's a fascinating technology, and I think it could potentially apply to any genre. It doesn't have to be limited to the sense of presence being within a body or either first person. They've already proven out third person stuff with it. So why couldn't you pull the camera back a little bit more and try some isometric things as well? And so you can get pretty creative with it. I always like thinking that there's something really unique there, and I think it's pretty fascinating. But
yeah, I mean, you never want to. Obviously, it doesn't seem like a natural fit for the kind of games we've made so far, but you never want to close that door. It's always interesting to think about, what could you do in the strategy genre or with games you're making to utilize VR in some kind of unique way. Because, a lot of the demos you see are like, I'm a first-person guy walking around, interacting with stuff, but, what's that next step? You could maybe take it to kind of give a different experience. So,
do you guys feel the change in the air too? Because to me, as a player, I'm really excited about VR becoming more standard. Is that same vibe? Sorry, Freudian slip. Is that same vibe there in the development side?
What do you think, Mark? You feeling it?
I know it's probably for the reasons you mentioned, that our games are, not that clear, one-to-one fit, that maybe we don't feel it as much.
Right.
But I mean, it is, we still talk about it, and people have, personally have Oculus dev kits and stuff. So
we're absolutely, absolutely fascinated by it. That's sort of, talking with the design side of folk. I think it's captivating. More on the business side, we'll see. I do think there's still a lot of roadblocks, but I think it's extremely promising.
Cool. The last thing I want to talk about with VR is price, because last week we didn't have a price for the Oculus Rift when it was announced.
Speaking of roadblocks,
Yeah. And I said, I believe we can go back and look, but I said I would get it at $350 I would pre-order it at $350, and I thought it was going to be $5. And then it came out as $600 for the pre-order.
And you pre-ordered one.
And I pre-ordered it.
What?
Yeah.
You were wrong on both fronts, and
I was completely wrong about everything. But let me explain why I pre-ordered. So I pre-ordered partly because they don't charge you until it ships. And that meant, but you get, Eve Valkyrie and you get Lucky's Tale for free for pre-ordering. And you also just reserve your spot in line because the ship date is getting pushed farther and farther back. It was in March 28th, and now it's in June.
And to be clear, that's like the ship date for your unit, probably.
Yes,
it's
yes.
not like they're waiting until June to release them. The more people buy one.
The people that pre-ordered when it said April will get it in April. The people who said pre-ordered when it said May will get it in May. I'm just getting mine in June if I keep it. And that's the other thing is now HTC has announced that pre-orders for the Vive will begin February 29th on Leap Day. So what I want to do is now that I have my pre-order and I don't get charged till June, I get to spend all of April and May looking at what other people think of the Vive, of the Rift, which one is better, which one is if it's worth the price, stuff like that. And I could cancel my pre-order at any time. So I've got the kind of like pre-order perks. I've shown my support for Oculus and for VR in general because I think that's important. Is like buying in early is also just kind of a show of support in my eyes.
But you're saying you can recant that support
Yes,
at any time.
exactly.
It's not really that genuine.
Well, if it comes out, because I do want to support it, but if it comes out and everyone's just like, man, this has terrible problems or something like that, I can kind of pull away without a loss.
Right.
And that was a really important thing to me is like, I'm willing to support VR early if I have a little bit of a safety net. Yeah. And this is just that little bit of a safety net that made me want to pull the trigger even on a higher price.
Vive hasn't announced price, right?
They have not,
no.
But
I guess it'll come
month.
out, end of February. If it's the same price as the Oculus Rift, they're almost certainly taking a loss on it.
Yeah.
Which I guess
they
Valve could afford to do all day, but I don't know if HTC can afford that.
And one of the things that people keep quoting is that Valve or HTC a while ago said that the Vive would cost a premium compared to the Oculus Rift. But when they were saying that, they were comparing it to the DK2, and it was at the time that Palmer Luckey was saying that they thought the Oculus was going to be around $350. So it's going to cost a premium compared to a $350 price tag. Yeah. So it could be the same price or probably more, but it's probably not going to be as crazy high as it was when they assumed the Rift price then.
Yeah, I just put up a story on the site today, or it'll be going up a bit later, comparing the two, because I actually, for the first time, got to use them back to back. Normally, I'll use one, and then a day later or months later, I'll use the other one. And neither of them is perfect, and there's still so much we don't know about just what the game ecosystem is going to be like, what the setup experience is going to be like.
That's what I was.
So many elements are just, when you're in a demo, don't come into play.
I was going to ask you that if I could get a preview of your article that I'll probably read later, but specifically with the HTC. That has some pretty stringent room requirements. Am I correct in that? Just the size of your room to be able to use it?
I don't think you need an especially big space. The main things is you need to be able to mount not even mount, but you need to be able to place the little laser things kind of in opposite corners of the room.
Okay.
So you'll need to either screw it into the wall or just have a bookshelf there. I think it's not too finicky on the placement of those. But again, that this is all from like nebulous feedback from developers who have said when they got really early hardware, they were like, this is a giant pain in the ass. Yeah. And Valve's like, no, it's going to be much easier, for the final one. Who knows? Yeah. Who knows what that's going to be like.
And we'll know pretty soon, fortunately, though, because this is the thing is, VR is going to be expensive for the first round, and it's going to take a while to be the kind of a consumer item. But we will have both of them in the wild come April. Yeah. It's actually like it'll be the first time that people get to do exactly what you did of putting them right next to each other and just comparing the experiences directly in their own environment.
My hunch right now is that Vive will have the superior technology when it comes out but it's going to come in rough from a kind of user experience and software side. They're probably not going to be able to get all that stuff finished and really polished. Oculus has been polishing for a really long time, and I think they're still working on their touch controllers, which are coming out after the headset. So they're really focused on the headset right now, and I think that's going to be a really smooth experience, smoother SDK, final release, all that kind of stuff. But it's not quite as ambitious.
And also the games, I guess, too. Like, I don't know how exclusive they are, but that'll be a huge... I mean, certainly with our community, that's going to be huge, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Palmer Luckey actually mentioned that in his most recent Reddit AMA. He was saying that when they talk about Oculus exclusive, they mean exclusive to the Oculus Store, which is kind of like their version of Steam, but not necessarily... That doesn't necessarily mean exclusive to Oculus hardware. So if a developer signs a deal to sell their game exclusively on the Oculus Store, you could download it and they could still make it available for the Vive or other headsets.
How is that exclusive?
Well, they're in the same way that like a game that is only sold on Steam is Steam exclusive. That's what he meant by Oculus exclusive.
Oh, so you're saying it would still be playable on the Vive hardware? Gotcha.
Exactly. It wouldn't. It's not that it wouldn't function on Vive hardware if the developers made it so it could function on Vive hardware.
Yeah, that stuff is still all a big.
It's a big question mark. Yeah.
Any other CES stuff you guys want to hear about?
He told me about the appliances. That's very important to me.
We were showing you guys a photo of the little dinky Iron Man mouse that I saw.
Oh, yeah.
The thing about that on the site. It's just this small Chinese peripherals company that they got a Marvel license from Disney in Asia and just started cranking out all these Marvel peripherals. They had like Captain America keyboard, I think, or Captain America something or other.
There it is.
The little mouse. That was fun.
We're pulling it up for those of you listening on the podcast. It just looks like Iron Man's face, like his head in mouse form, pretty exactly.
It's pretty small. Like you would need a small hand to use that mouse comfortably.
You just kind of smother them while you use your computer.
That's kind of grim actually. Now that I think about it. Well. We can move right along from CES because there's a lot of other stuff to talk about on this show. Speedrunning, yeah. I want to talk about speedrunning because AGDQ, Awesome Games Done Quick, happened all last week. It's for those of you who don't know, 24-hour, 7-day speedrunning marathon where they take donations, and all of the donations go towards the Prevent Cancer Foundation. And they raised $1.2 million in donations for the Prevent Cancer Foundation in a week, which is just incredible.
It's crazy.
It's great. It's such a good example of, like, gamers just coming together for a really good cause.
Doing crazy shit, right?
Yeah. And it's like, the event is just so great. Like, everyone's nice, and it's like my favorite thing the internet does, like, in general. Like, it's just, like, so positive, and, it shows, like, the good that the gaming community can do, and you get to see, just some crazy shit happening. The guys like just kind of ripping apart the fabric of games, which makes me like a little uncomfortable.
To make the world a better place. It does. I'm sure as a designer, you might get some interesting information on your games, right?
Yeah. It's a great.
What was sorry. I'm really curious because Mark was telling me earlier that he watched some of this. What was the craziest cheat or exploit you saw?
I don't know. The craziest stuff that you usually see is like the tool assisted stuff. That's when like the really crazy stuff happens. It's like stuff inputs that are impossible for like human hands to do, and they just completely like rip apart like Mega Man or something. Like they'll just be like in walls, and they're kind of just running up on top of the level for like the whole time. And they're like, "Oh, I'm in the boss room. Oh, I beat the boss in like 2 seconds." I'm like, moving on. Just like what?
Destroying all of those development teams' hard work to play it properly.
Yeah.
The craziest skip I saw was actually I feel like a lot of the best skips are in Ocarina of Time.
Yeah.
And, people used to do these really intricate skips with tool assisted computer, like on emulators on the PC. And they've gotten good enough now where they can just do them by hand. Where they do these crazy skips where, like, they'll use the Ocarina item skip as, or not skip, but bug is like a classic one where they can use any item in the game as the Ocarina. So they can just skip getting the Ocarina entirely. And then there's this other one where when they beat a boss, they know that a timer starts counting up. And so if they do something in the exact right amount of time and then touch the portal that transports them out of the boss room, at the exact time, it will send them to a different place, but only if they cancel the portal and then go through a doorway. And it's like this ridiculously complex skip, but what it lets them do is basically jump from any room in the game to any other room in the game, as long as they know the exact timing of that.
Oh my god.
Yeah, and they do like their level of knowledge is like, it's so crazy. Like they'll be like, oh, like you have to do this on like this frame, so they'll pause buffer and like get the exact frame, and then they'll be like, oh, if you do this, like you soft lock the game and you have to start the run over. You're like, what? How did you figure this out?
It's thousands and thousands of runs, right? They just keep doing
Yeah.
it and doing it and doing it, and
I love when developers embrace that stuff too. Like Derek Yu with Spelunky is a great example where he hid a lot of stuff in that game, but also there are things the community has figured out that, you know, he never intended people to do or never thought people would do. But he embraces that stuff. He doesn't like, oh, I got to patch out that exploit they found. That's just part of the DNA of that community now, is finding the craziest ways to exploit this game. And I think that keeps things alive longer when you embrace that.
It's kind of strange. Like I know the Octodad guys, and they would do like patches and stuff, and like they'd have speedrunners be like, could you not fix this, because it's like integral to the speedrun. So it's like it's a strange relationship, but
I love that. I love when bugs become features.
Yeah.
There are things in Terraria that happen too, where if you guys know what hoiking is. Hoiking is a trick in Terraria where when they added slanted blocks, like slopes, people figured out that if you made the slope push into you, you would get pushed a direction away from the slope depending on what angle it was. And so and incredibly fast, and you could link them together. So if you got pushed into one slope, you could zoom like all the way across the map faster than anything possible in the game. Or up or down, like any direction. You could use it on items, mobs, players, anything. And the developers, Relogic, eventually were just like, we're just not going to fix hoiking because it became so like key to these creations that people were making, and people liked it so much that the bug just became a feature. And now it's a thing.
So what speedruns did you guys get a chance to watch over the weekend?
man, I watched a lot.
Yeah, I can't remember all the ones I watched.
Half-Life 2 was cool. There's always like really cool movement where they're running backwards and just kind of like flying across the map. And then they have to like find a spot to land that's not on level ground or else they'll die from fall damage. So they're just like, yeah, I watched that one. The Battle Block co-op run was really cool. The developers were like kind of there and talking to them, so that was really funny. Because they would do stuff like they would just completely break the game right in front of them, and they're like, "What? Like, you can't do that."
It's due to the speedrun.
Yeah.
That's why. I mean, but it's interesting, too. You talk about how it becomes a feature. I mean, as dev, you don't want to fix these things if they're, like, clearly opt-in, like, exploits for this one purpose. You can still play the game normally. You can still play it as designers, as content creators intended. But if you want to opt into this and have fun with it, as long as it's not breaking that baseline experience, then you keep it in there and you let these sorts of things happen, which are really, really cool.
Yeah.
Was there an XCOM speedrun over the weekend?
I feel like no. I think I've seen the tool assisted run where they get the perfect RNG and it was still like pretty long.
Yeah.
XCOM is kind of like a speedrun nightmare.
Yeah.
XCOM 2 especially, because it's like everything is random. Every like moment of the game there's something random happening. And that's like when people are doing these speedruns, like, oh, I gotta deal with some RNG here. Like, I hate this part of the run. That would just be like the entire run for XCOM. But I mean, they still I would like to see someone try it because I mean, they did like Fire Emblem Path of Radiance run, which was cool.
Yeah. Turn-based strategy game speedruns are always interesting to me because it seems like so much time is lost in just the basic mechanics of movement and ending turns and stuff like that.
Right. And they'll go through menus and they'll just like be blazing through these menus. Like that's like a huge part of the speed of the game, which makes sense because strategy games like you play through the UI, so having the speed to go through menus and stuff is like an optimal skill for speedrunning.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also I really enjoyed the Mirror's Edge speedrun. I thought that
would be cool to watch.
It was really crazy how many glitches they found in that game. I think they can beat it in like an hour, a little over an hour. And it's so much of it is they can just kind of clip through a wall and like fall into the next trigger to the next area. Portal does a lot of that too.
I like the Mario Kart runs do that constantly. They're like, oh, the Mario Kart 64 one. They're like, oh, I'll hit this I'll hit this jump and that thinks I'm on the next lap.
Oh, yeah.
Because I hit that trigger, like whatever.
The N64 era seems perfect for speedrunning just because it was kind of the dawn of 3D games on consoles, and like the code in those games, just it has to be kind of sloppy and made up as they were going along because they were breaking new ground. Like they didn't know how to do the stuff that they were doing in those games, and I think it shows in Mario Kart 64.
Mario Kart. We were talking about Mario before. I mean, you were telling me about Mario 64, Super Mario World, but even the original Mario Brothers, the designers built in intended speed runs. When you look at the warp zone and get on top of the map and go to those, it's pretty interesting. Even when you look at the seeds of some of that stuff. And then you said, I don't know what Super Mario World did, but didn't they do some crazy stuff?
Could like play the game in a way that they like hex edit the game and get warped to the credits.
They do a bug where their button inputs are literally rewriting the code of the game, and then they do one thing that runs the code and it just changes what's going on. And in a similar way, there was last year, I think it was either in Summer Games Done Quick or AGDQ last year, with the TaskBot, the tool-assisted bot, they made Pokemon Red or Pokemon Blue actually show Twitch chat in live. Like they hooked it up to the internet, and they used glitches like that where they reprogrammed the game from within the game and showed Twitch chat to the stream, which is just that gets mind-boggling to me. That's just insane. I guess games are too big. You can't edit them like that. They're not like there's too much code.
Yeah, it definitely gets a little bit messier. I think with the more modern games, they're tougher to find those exploits, but it's incredible what they do.
Yeah. Well, I do want to do just a little, this is totally just a personal pitch. If you do get a chance to see Games Done Quick doing Summer Games Done Quick this year, or this summer, and then AGDQ 2017 next year, I highly recommend you check it out. It's really for a great cause. It's a great kind of community event, and Games Done Quick does really good work with it. So keep an eye out for that next year. I think now, though, we are going to bid adieu to our very own Wes Fenlon.
Aww.
Thank you for joining us, Wes.
I want to see XCOM.
You can hang out if you'd like.
Okay, I'll stay.
Okay, never mind. Wes lied to all of us.
I'll put up with the heat.
We are going to have to get...
I have work to do, but who cares?
We are going to have to get Mark over to the computer here. What we're going to do is we're going to be playing a live demo of XCOM 2. We're going to be going through the first mission of it. Mark will be playing on the hardest difficulty as well.
Legend.